Coming up, themes of bullying and traditional culture bring legends to life in the novel Healer of the Water Monster. One of Wisconsin's most influential Indigenous leaders discusses bridging tribal communities and education, and Holly Cook Macarro weighs in on what proposed budget cuts could mean for Native communities. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. The U.S. Agriculture Department announced today $50 million in grants aimed at Indigenous food supply chains. The program funds projects that expand the harvest and process services of Indigenous meats such as bison, reindeer, and salmon. Officials are calling the pledge historic for its focus on these unique species which are left out of federal programs. The grants are part of the USDA's move to boost tribal food sovereignty and security. USDA Office of Tribal Relations Director Heather Dawn Thompson spoke to ICT exclusively.
Historically, USDA has predominantly invested in and provided loans in processing for the animals that we regulate, cattle, poultry, and swine, etc. But these are not the animals that tribal leaders have told us they want to process and provide for their communities. This is the first time in history that our funds are going to be available for Indigenous animals. Moose, reindeer, elk, bison, seafood. We're changing the course of history together.
In the Pacific Northwest, a federal judge is undoing the life sentence of an Indigenous man convicted of crimes in his youth. A decade ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled these sentences under any circumstance are unconstitutional for children under 18 years old. Colville Tribe citizen Herbert Rice Jr. was 17 when he was convicted for the robbery and murder of Dorothy and Mike Nikoloff. Rice's deal, struck jointly by the prosecution and defense, recommends that 2 concurrent sentences of 40 years, which is a reduction from life without parole. The victim's family, who supports the reduction, read statements at Rice's March 21st resentencing hearing in Yakima County Superior Court. In his ruling, the judge approved the deal, which means Rice will now serve 5 more years before he's released in 2028. Now to North Dakota, where a federal judge last week ruled a lawsuit can proceed that claims the state's new legislative map dilutes the Native vote. When the legislature redrew its map following the 2020 census, it illegally trimmed Native majority districts according to the filing. Both the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians and the Spirit Lake Tribe sued, saying the map violates the Federal Voting Rights Act. Federal Judge Peter Wilt tossed out the state's motion to dismiss the case and set a trial date for July.
Whether we like it or not, we have to participate in these systems that have historically forgotten about our people and have intentionally set up roadblocks to keep us from exercising our right to vote. And so the judge allowing the motion to go forward is a win for our tribal people.
Around the country, dancers are back in the arena for powwow season. That includes the Phoenix, Arizona Valley. ICT's Ripley Simone Kennebrew has more on this special event.
Colorful and inclusive. That's how attendees here described this two-spirit powwow. The Phoenix Indian Center and South Mountain Community College co-sponsored this event. It is one of a handful of powwows made specifically for two-spirit relatives. Hundreds attended, and dancers traveled from far and near to support and represent their culture and pride.
My name is Sean Snyder, and my pronouns are they, them. I am a two-spirit dancer, and I'm here at the powwow just to celebrate and dance with everybody. This powwow is so unique because it's a two-spirit run event. So that is, for our community, two-spirit is the umbrella term or the inclusive term for our 2S LGBTQIA community. So this is a community event, open to the public, and a chance for us to dance, in our best.
Adrian Stevens is a grass dancer. He says he is grateful for this event because it offers a rare opportunity and safe space.
So identifying as Two-Spirit is really important because it's specific to Indigenous and Native American communities. I like to tell people that Two-Spirit belongs to those communities because we are about moving within spiritual spaces that are both gender fluid. So feminine, masculine. I am able to operate in spiritual settings in both of those spaces and perform duties that are assigned to feminine or masculine signs.
Indigenous drag queen Navajo emceed the event.
I'm here to represent not only being Navajo, but being a two-spirit person. I feel that whether I'm dressed in drag or dressed as a boy, I feel that I am the entity of both genders. I've always known that I was gay. I've always known that I was something special. And it was my grandma that would always keep me safe and always keep me together. But I never understood that, what that meant. I just thought, I'm a special person.
In Phoenix, Arizona, Ripley Simone Kennebrew, ICT News.
The Navajo Nation is rolling out a new skate park to the sound of fanfare. The Diné Skate Garden is located in the community 2 Gray Hills on the Navajo Nation. The grand opening event drew in professional skateboarder Tony Hawk, whose foundation helped create the project. Navajo citizens cheered as its president, Boo Van Nygren, joined in on the celebration. Positive comments poured in on social media in response to the video, with many calling Nygren the, quote, coolest Navajo president ever. The park, located between Shiprock and Gallup, was created so that Navajo children could skate safely on tribal lands. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Diné people believe, like many tribes, that children are sacred. That theme comes to light in the novel called Healer of the Water Monster. In the book, it's up to a young boy named Nathan to save the day. Brian Young, who has degrees from both Yale University and Columbia University, wrote the book as his first novel. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Nathan is a young man in Healer of the Water Monster. Tell us about him.
Nathan is such an amazing character because he represents the idea of masculine care and compassion. And when I was writing Nathan, especially in the revising process, because I rewrote this book 7 times throughout its entire process, I approached Nathan's character with the idea that his superpower is being kind and being compassionate to those around him. And especially in a lot of Indigenous communities, young males are encouraged to kind of just bottle up our emotions and to not exhibit any type of compassion towards other beings. So when I was writing Nathan, that was always a guiding philosophy of his character.
What I love about Nathan is that he takes a pretty gutsy decision of deciding to spend the summer to live with his grandmother. So he has no cell service, running water, or electricity. Tell us about that.
So that was actually kind of based on my childhood. My mom would often send me to my grandparents' place. Originally, I am from Saratoga, so Sawmill and Port Defiance, Arizona. And my grandparents lived in Sawmill, and we had cattle out in Nazlini. So often when I get sent to my grandma's place, we'd go all the way to Naz, which in that community, there is no infrastructure. There's no running water. There's no electricity. So often my grandparents would tell me the traditional stories, which would eventually influence my book, Healer of the Water Monster. And while it can be boring, there is also a lot of, I don't want to say magic, but definitely there's a lot of special qualities to living in that environment. Especially, like, you have to have a really strong relationship with the people around you. And I'm very fortunate that my grandparents and I were very close.
Tell us about the water monster and its place in your traditional culture.
Of course. So in my traditional culture, we have what's called Hajine Bahanet, or the emergence story. We believe that we are currently in the fourth world, and in the third world is where water monsters come from. I've also heard the interpretation that we're in the fifth world, so I just want to give a quick shout out to those people who have that as part of their upbringing. But the way I was told by my grandparents is that we're in the fourth world. And in the third world, it was completely ruled by Mother Water Monster. And after the first beings, first man, first woman, first turkey, first coyote, first everything, they kidnapped one of Mother Water Monster's infants, and that caused her to raise the water levels, and we had to escape her wrath by climbing up a tall reed into the ceiling and eventually merge into the fourth world. So my book references that storyline pretty much at the very beginning, but I also say in my book that water monsters followed the first beings into the fourth world and reside near or in bodies of waters in Diné, or the traditional homelands of the Navajo. And with my book, I also say that with their songs, they're able to protect the bodies of water, such as ponds, rivers, lakes, you name it, they protect it. And so Nathan comes across Pond, this water monster, and this particular water monster has been sick for about 30 years. And as a result, there's been a drought in the area for 30 years, and it's up to him to heal the water monster named Pond.
The sequel, Heroes of the Water Monster, will be released next month. Will Nathan still be a character in that book?
Yes, his journey still continues, and I am just really excited for people to read it. Nathan does some amazing things with water. If you are familiar with the Avatar: The Last Airbender series, Nathan essentially becomes a waterbender, and he has to use his abilities to manipulate water to help the powerful Yatoh Ba'ani, another water monster, find a modern enemy that is stealing water from all across the Nipakea.
Brian, I want to talk about the publisher that you worked with. Tell us about that.
Of course. So I'm very fortunate to have been brought onto the publishing team called Heartdrum, which is the first Native focus imprint of a Big Five, I think it might be Big Four at this point, Big Five publishing company. And it's a very special, very wonderful community of Native writers devoted to writing to young Native children. And my book was one of the first books that was published by Heartdrum. And there are so many beautiful, wonderful stories alongside here of the water monsters, such as Christine Day's I Can Make This Promise, Cynthia Latex-Smith, who is a legend in Native literature for young readers. She has a book with Heartdrum called Sisters of the Neversea, which is a Native interpretation of the Peter Pan story. It's amazing. I highly recommend everyone watch it or read it. So yes, Heartdrum's the first Native focus imprint of one of the Big Five.
Well, Brian Young, the author of Healer of the Water Monster, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Carla Vigue is the Director of Tribal Relations for the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her work at the school includes building relationships with tribal nations, communities, and organizations. Carla joins us now virtually to talk about her role at the university and her recent recognition as an influential leader in the state. Hello to you, Carla.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well. You've been named one of Wisconsin's most influential Indigenous leaders. What does that mean to you?
You know, it's a wonderful honor, and I think for me, it really is about the people who have helped me to get to where I am right now. I grew up in a community, the Oneida Nation here in Wisconsin, where the tribal leaders and others in the community were always trying to lift each other up, trying to support each other in what we do. And I've always held that in my heart in every position I've ever had. And so really being recognized as an influential person, it's really recognizing all of those other people too.
You are the Director of Tribal Relations for the University of Wisconsin-Madison. What kinds of work do you do and engage in through that position?
Sure. So this is a position that was created a few years ago by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It was in response to a kind of an organic group that had come together that said we can do more for Native people on campus and in the state. And how do we engage the tribal nations? How do we engage the students more? And they came together and proposed this position of the Director of Tribal Relations. And I had a predecessor. He was there for 3 years and he retired. So it's a fairly new position, but it's a really important position in that I work directly with the tribal elected leadership in helping them realize their goals for the university. And then also work within the campus community to make sure that we're supportive of the Native students that we have on campus. The University of Wisconsin-Madison has been a leader in terms of making sure that we acknowledge our history. UW-Madison is a land-grant university. We are located on ancestral Ho-Chunk lands, and we acknowledge that, and we teach the history of that time, and then we work to go beyond it. What more can we do? More than acknowledging, more than just saying that we're on Ho-Chunk land. How do we create additional opportunities for Native people? How do we create a better place of belonging for Native students?
When you're working directly with these tribal leaders, what do they tell you is important to them in supporting students?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we've been working on. Again, I'm fairly new to this position, but one of the very first meetings I had was with the Great Lakes Intertribal Council, their board, and they have been talking for some time about opportunity and access. How do we get more students in the door here at UW-Madison, this incredible world-class university with incredible research and incredible education opportunities? How do we get more people here? And obviously one of the factors is always cost. So we are looking at what other states have already done in some cases, and trying to see if there are ways that we can look at tuition and other costs that people incur when they come to college. So working directly with those tribal leaders who have really good ideas and really are passionate about getting their students here, and seeing what we can do to be a leader in that field too.
It's graduation season right now. What are the majority of Native students studying, or what are some interests that they have?
So we have a pretty diverse student population. We have a student group organization that's called Wunkshik, and I've had a chance to meet some of the leaders from that organization and learn from them. I've seen some of the artwork we have that some of the students do on campus. I think it's just a wide, vast array of things that people do on campus when they're students here. We also have, it's called the Great Lakes Indigenous Law Center. So we have a large number of people on campus who come here and study Indian law, one of the best places to study Indian law in the country.
I'm only half joking when I say that I hope that some of them become journalists. I want to actually switch gears, though, and talk about how your personal upbringing as a tribal citizen informs the work that you do now.
Yeah, it's everything, really. I mean, so I grew up on the Oneida Indian Reservation. I tell this story a lot. I lived across the street from this woman. Her name was Loretta Matoxen. She was our tribal historian. she influenced me tremendously growing up to learn our ways, our history. And she was always the first person to be supportive when I wanted to go to school or take, that trip my senior year in high school to France with the French Club. Always the first person to be supportive. And then, when I moved to DC, there were so many people from my community that were already working in politics and in Washington, DC. Ernie Stevens Jr. from the National Indian Gaming Association and others really just helped me along. And I think that's what drives me, is that I know that I did not get here on my own, and I want to do just as others in my community have done and helped anyone and everyone that I can achieve their goals.
Well, Carla Vigue, one of Wisconsin's most influential Native leaders of 2023, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Some lawmakers say that U.S. debt is out of control and the government needs to make some serious budget cuts. Budget cuts could mean that the programs benefiting tribes could be on the chopping block. ICT regular contributor Holly Cook Macarro has been watching this fight. She's a partner with Spirit Rock Consulting and a board member of Indig Public Media, the parent company that owns ICT and the ICT Newscast. Hi, Holly.
Hi, Elia. It's good to see you.
The budget ceiling is approaching us pretty quickly, and both sides of the aisle are concerned. There have been some indications by House Republicans that anything not related to defense funding is being considered to be cut. What does this mean for tribes?
This really feels a bit to me like we are crying wolf again, probably much like it feels to many of you out in Indian country that are watching. But here we go again. And on this debate on the debt ceiling. And as you noted, we have very few legislative days, about 2 months, but with only about 25 legislative days, according to the Department of Treasury's estimate. So before we hit the boundary of the nation's credit limit, or what we call the debt ceiling. So I think for Indian country, we can use the last few days and the information that's come out of Speaker McCarthy as the leader of the House Republican majority about what about what their priorities are, their spending priorities, and a bit about what they plan to attach to as what I'm calling policy riders on this debt ceiling legislation that needs to pass. So the impacts of those could involve a significant cut. Mark Trahant of Indian Country Today noted yesterday in a very good piece the potential for a $327 million cut for the IHS. This morning, Secretary Holland spoke about the potential for significant cuts to law enforcement spending, which, as she noted in her testimony in the House Resources Committee, is the issue she hears the most about from tribal leaders. And the proposed cuts that Speaker McCarthy announced this week could end up with a reduction in up to 1,500 law enforcement personnel and support staff, with impacts on teachers, 500 fewer teachers out of the Bureau of Indian Education, or BIE as we call it, and also result with delays in BIE school repairs and construction. So the potential impacts of these policy riders that are proposed to be attached to the debt ceiling legislation could have serious impacts on Indian country. I will say, though, that this proposal that is being floated by the Republicans and to move right now is really just a messaging bill. Real negotiations haven't started. There's going to have to be some, as always, compromise and coming to the middle. And the Biden administration has said, you know what, House, you're on your own. You need to pass this. McConnell is saying the White House needs to come to the table to negotiate. And even in the Senate, there are significant, I guess, concerns and efforts and discussion around one of the main things that will also affect Indian country coming out of Speaker McCarthy's proposal is the permitting reform. And I'm waiting for details on that. That proposal from Speaker McCarthy should be out any minute. And we'll, I know, be talking about that again.
I'm glad that you mentioned that this is a messaging bill and it's moving along quite quickly. For tribal leaders who are listening to this conversation and are maybe hearing some of these cuts to law enforcement, to teachers, to schools, and they want to, give their say and make sure that Congress is hearing them, what are the ways that they can do that?
You can weigh in with your member of Congress, and the debt ceiling legislation has to start in the House, and then it will be considered by the Senate. And usually by that time, the White House will have weighed in. But right now, the key place for this debt ceiling discussion is in the House of Representatives. I recommend that you look up who your member of Congress is, if you don't already know, and send a note in with concerns about what some of what we are talking about here to your member, and the impacts on Indian country or you personally that you see otherwise.
Well, Holly Cook Macarro, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Aaliyah.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.